Oromo Voice Radio English program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Oromia is a country in East Africa well known as the Horn of Africa. It's 600,000 square kilometers, making it larger than France, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Oromia is populated by over 40 million people. It's the origin of human race and the Geleto system. Oromia is the birthplace of coffee and home to world-class athletes. Also is a nation with multi-faith society, Christianity, Islam, and Waqf. Oromia is the third largest single nation in Africa and the single largest nation in East Africa. It has been occupied by Ethiopia for over 130 years and is struggling for self-determination. Oromia has an unaccounted number of Oromo refugees living in other countries.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Aliye Geleto. Our guest, Tsegaye Ararssa from University of Melbourne, who will carry on from where we stopped last week.
Right. This is a very interesting question because the Australian government is bound by international law. And according to international law, whoever is the government of a particular country that is recognized by the international community, they have the obligation, as long as their foreign relations is properly put in place and it's peaceful, they have the obligation to grant visa or to all government officials to travel to their country for meeting the Australian authorities, for meeting their own population, or even for living or for short or long-term stay in this country. The reason is by granting visa to these officials, they're not granting visa to this particular individuals. They are actually granting visa, facilitating the movement of the government for governmental missions. So those individuals who come on a government mission as delegates of the Ethiopian government and get a visa actually do not come on their personal capacity, and they do not speak in their personal capacity. They speak in the name of the government, on behalf of the government, and the Australian government is only doing its obligation, discharging its obligation when they facilitate their travel, protect their security, and make sure that they are back home safely. So that's the nature of international law. That's the nature of doing business in the world of diplomacy. But that said, they understand that there is a lot of criminality that's happening. They always insist that human rights be respected, that the perpetrators of any human rights violation be brought before justice, before court, and so on and so forth. But if they are not, and if the government comes up with its officials, until that person is, this particular official is found guilty, the Australian government cannot say it is criminal, because it has got the credential of the Ethiopian government with which the government of Australia deals. So that's one of the problems of international law. Now, the second point you raised is about how the Ethiopian government and its supporters do this spectacle of showing the success story from Ethiopia. One of the things that happened in 2012 when the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Melbourne died, was that the supporters of the Ethiopian government in Australia wanted to have a live funeral ceremony staged by the Ethiopian television to be transmitted at the Federation Square here. Now, they wanted to do that as part of their own propaganda, so they extend their propaganda to the whole world and show that Ethiopians all over the world are mourning the loss of their leader. But there were very few supporters who organized that, and a lot of money was behind it, a lot of government money too. The Ethiopian government money was behind it. When that happens, naturally all those Ethiopians, not just Oromos, all those Ethiopians who are persecuted by the government resisted. They said, no way, this is an offense to our misery, untold story of misery. It is under this man's watch that we died, we survived torture, we were persecuted, we were sent away, and we are here. and it will be offending it will be morally reprehensible to us if we see that this is happening in this country. And they were right, I think, in resisting that. But on the other hand, the other groups said, we are going to celebrate it nonetheless. I mean, it's mourn his death nonetheless. And it was funny because they themselves, the supporters themselves, most of them, are here and granted visas because they claimed they are persecuted. But they are supporters of the government. And how is it that they are actually persecuted if they are such a supporter of the government? This is what is funny what looks funny to the Australian government. And it's natural that people laughed at that, but it's also interesting that the Oromo community, for example, resisted the staging of that funeral ceremony, and in fact, there would have been a clash if that was going to be staged. And naturally, because these are people who have undergone an extraordinary acts of violence and torture under that regime, and they will get only emotional when they see this kind of activity. And if there is going to be a clash, then who will take responsibility? So that argument in Victoria won the day, and somehow the television spectacle was stopped at the very last minute, I think, in the final day.
Can we say Oromo is targeted at home and diaspora as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have seen lots of incidents like people tracked down and shot in Kenya by the Ethiopian security and intelligence personnel. From the refugee camps, people have been tracked down, arrested, and taken back to Ethiopia and die in Ethiopian detention centers several times. The case of Tesfahun Chameda, an engineer away from Ethiopia who was in refugee camp, UN refugee camp, who was abducted from there and taken back to the detention centers and tortured and finally died in the prison. And nobody so far, no inquiry has been staged, and nobody responded how that happened. Nobody explained from the government how that happened. Nobody took responsibility for the death of that individual. Now, that's only one incident, an example. They do this in Yemen. They do this in Djibouti. They do this in the Sudan, in southern Sudan. They do this in Cairo. They attack diaspora communities, particularly Oromos, especially those who are active in political organizations. They track them down, they pursue them, they attack them, they abduct them, then they take them back. Even in the West, they track them, they intimidate them. They track and tap their telephones. I am one example. My phone is tapped, my Facebook page is always screened, my communication with my friends back home is totally screened, so much so that I don't now have any contact whatsoever with my friends. Not because I'm afraid, nothing would happen to me, but my friends would be targeted because of that. So I live like I have no friends. That's how life is.
So is it legal to actually prosecute and kill Oromo anywhere they find for the Ethiopian government?
What is it?
Is it legal for the Ethiopian government to actually kill and prosecute everywhere they find them, even including Australia?
No way. It's not legal to kill anyone anywhere. The reason they find it easy to do that in the Horn of Africa countries such as Somalia, Kenya, Djibouti, South Sudan, etc., is because they are governments who are weak or collapsed states like Somalia, Mogadishu. Hargeisa is kind of friendly with Ethiopia because it's not recognized internationally except by Ethiopia. So it's a friendly state. It's a state that's very friendly to Ethiopia because also it depends on the food export of Ethiopia to a large extent. In these countries, these are weak states. Some of them are collapsed states. Some of them are very new states. Some of them are client states, clients to the Ethiopian government, like the government of South Sudan until a very short while ago, because it facilitated its independence. Now, in these countries, their borders are not secure, the states are not very strong, the law enforcement officials are not strong, the security intelligence personnel is not very capable. The Ethiopian government, as you know, is one of the governments which have got the very, very strong security and intelligence system. So they penetrate these territories and hound people and to get them. And then they also have these legal mechanisms of extradition and so on and so forth, extradition agreements with weak states such as the Yemeni state now. The Yemen government is very much embattled because of the internal arrest and international anti-terrorist schemes going on in there. So they've got these kinds of agreements. They penetrate those countries. They go in and arrest people and abduct them home. In the West, they can't do that because the law enforcement is serious, the borders are very secure, and there is no such thing as death penalty or anything. And even if you have people who you say they are criminals, you have to first get a court warrant for that, get them properly arrested, get them properly interrogated, get them properly tried and convicted before you take any action. Now, it is absolutely impossible for them to try to arrest any Oromo in Australia or to kill them because the law doesn't allow them to do so. Even if they want to take them out of this country, there needs to be an agreement with the government of Australia, or at least a behind-the-scene agreement between the intelligence offices of the two governments in order to get a person arrested and abducted back home. Now, this doesn't happen usually. This happens only if there is an agreement on drug trafficking, for example, prevention of drug trafficking, or an agreement on collaboration on anti-terrorist schemes, etc. A very serious crime.
So we run out of time.
Yeah.
Can you finally suggest one or two things the Oromo and diaspora can do to actually protect themselves and their community?
Yeah. I think the Oromo community generally, at least in the West, they just have to live their life in accordance with the laws of the country. And to my knowledge, the Oromo community and also the wider Ethiopian community in Australia are comparatively a very peaceful community, and they just are here to make it life and to have a fair go in this country of newfound opportunities. They study hard, they work hard, and they are not spendy. They live their lives, they raise their children properly, and that's how they live, and I think they should keep on doing that. The second thing is that the government, of course, will tap into their phones, their Facebook pages, they might do all sorts of intelligence things, but they can't do anything to them physically. But they have to be very careful with the supporters of the government, their fans. There are very passionate, strong supporters some of them are funded by the government, and they can provoke a dispute and they can attack you personally. So beware of those people who want to attack some people through even the cyber media and then physically. So one has to be very careful with that. The third thing is that as a community, it's very good that the Western Australian Oromo community actually responded to the government later properly. One of the things they said is, look, we can't negotiate, we can't sit down and talk with a government that has got blood in its hands, right? And then this is a very powerful statement to make, and it is wonderful that they actually said, we're not going to come and sit with you as Oromo community here with the government. No. And they, in fact, say that any Oromo individual who will take part in that meeting, and they have the right to do so, by the way, and if they do, they are not going to participate in our name, they are not going to speak on our behalf. So that is a very clear statement to the government. So as a community, they have responded in one voice, and that's a very good thing to do. I think they have to step up and continue to do that in the future as well.
Thank you, Tsegaye, for coming and sharing your knowledge and experience.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you, Ali.